Hey Ravish, really excited to have you on this episode of the Shopify App podcast presented by Applicator. How's it going? How are you doing today?
All good, all good. Just been a very hectic week, but the good kind of hectic. So yeah.
No, it's great to hear that. But just quickly before we get started, could you just introduce yourself and the company just for the benefit of our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ravish. I'm one of the three co-founders of Hmong Commerce. At Hmong, we're building a full funnel holistic upsell app for Shopify stores. We've also launched on BigCommerce, so now we're looking at that market as well. And our entire focus is to drive clear impact in terms of AOV and incremental sales.
Nice, very interesting. I know you've mentioned right now that you're getting started or you've just gone started big commerce as well, but specifically as it comes to the Shopify app space, how did you sort of pick Shopify as the platform to start on first? And generally, why start with the Shopify app? How did you get into the ecosystem?
Sure. So I think I haven't been close to D2C in general over the last few years. I think it was just a matter of serendipity where I met a few app devs doing a good job on the Shopify app ecosystem sitting out of India. And I met them 3, 4 years ago. So I didn't think of it too much. But I've been wanting to start up for a while now. And we had certain stakes in the ground that we had. It needs to be software, it needs to start making money from day one and things like that. So what we realized was that in terms of software, I think we were very sure that we want to build a software business. The bigger challenge was how would you distribute to get your first 150, 200 users? And marketplaces in general seemed like a good bet there. So then we went around scouring marketplaces. We saw Shopify, we saw Zoom, we saw Slack, a few that I think I should have seen, but I didn't. And Shopify was one marketplace where there's enough evidence of success. And that's why we took that call. Like Zoom is very interesting, but there's no evidence of success. So we dropped it, for example.
Makes sense. And just your point on, meeting Shopify app devs in India, it's honestly been quite incredible to see how quickly the ecosystem has risen in India. Obviously, D2C has gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, but also from an app development or e-commerce enablement perspective, that's been really nice to see. Just on staying on the same point, how did you, okay, so you decided, okay, I want to do something in the space. I want to start, or it makes sense to start with Shopify. How did you then pick what problem you want to solve or where you want your app to sort of originate?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I'm one of the three co-founders. Both other co-founders are very technical. I'm the non-technical marketing distribution focused co-founder. So our search for what use case to solve for was also a very distribution first approach. It was not a very problem solution kind of an approach. So once we narrowed down, okay, let's go ahead and build something on Shopify because there's evidence of success and we'll be able to establish our first layer of distribution. We were very clear that, okay, what will be our first layer of distribution? And that had to be organic app store search. So then we narrowed it down to the use cases where there is enough search volume itself for you to even build a solution. Now, search volume numbers aren't publicly available, but you can look at the size and the number of competitors as a proxy of the size of that market. So that's where we did a very typical SEO, ASO approach where we saw different keywords, saw how many competitors are in that keyword, what could be the potential size of that keyword. And we excluded all keywords that had winner take all players, something like a recharge and subscription, or like a Georgia's in customer support. Anything that had a winner take all player was completely off limits then. So then we saw different keyword sections and stuff, and upsell, cross-sell, frequently bought together, volume discount. This came out as one universe of keywords that seemed like big enough to go after, but also enough scope for new competitors to come and innovate on the existing products.
Very interesting. That's actually, I haven't really thought about that as a method for app sort of idea discovery. And it's interesting to hear how you all sort of went about that. You mentioned you're a non-technical founder. How does that sort of play in your mind as you sort of were building out the app? Obviously, a lot of the beginning work as for a Shopify app tends to be tech focused or dev focused, but then over time, once the platform and the solution is in place, a lot of it switches over to, hey, how do we market this better? Partnership, sales, customer service. Just, and I also, another thing we've noticed is just a lot more non-technical founders getting into the space. And just, do you have any sort of suggestions or tips about how you went about that journey?
So in my case, so the biggest problem that any non-technical founder faces is finding technical co-founders. I think that is like the numero uno biggest burning problem. I don't think I faced that problem at all, mainly because both my co-founders are very close friends. I've known them for the better part of 5-8 years now, and they're as technical gets. So for me, that wasn't ever a challenge. And so we've been building for about a year. We've been live for about 6 months. For the first 6 months, I actually had no work as such. I did some level of customer support, some level of feedback collection and stuff, but no active marketing execution. That has come into the picture in the last 2-3 months. And yeah, as you rightly mentioned, that there will be a time when the business transitions from product heavy to distribution heavy. I think we're still not there yet. We're still quite product heavy. And I think that might be the case for about 6 to 8 months before we're at a place where the rate limiting factor of the business is distribution, not product.
Got it. Makes sense. Just coming back to the app sort of discovery stage and ideation stage, did you, so once you'll sort of backtrack into which category you thought made sense to build in, did you spend time talking to merchants or sort of actively seeking out merchants and try and get them to either validate the idea or try out like early versions of the product? How do you go about that stage?
Oh, not really. I mean, we actually, all three of us are very quant heavy in terms of the way we look at things, the way we approach anything. We're not very qual heavy. While we do understand the value of that qualitative evidence brings to the table, I would still not jump into something or deep dive into something without the actual hard quantitative statistics backing me up. So our entire idea was, okay, so here's a market, here are our competitors. What is the most basic solution we can go live with? And get it up and running in a couple of months' time with like very limited complexity, very limited customizations, and then start showcasing that in front of merchants on Reddit, on Twitter, and things like that. So I think pre-launch, we didn't really do any qualitative feedback collection. We just took a gut call and went with it. And then spent the first month and a half talking to people, mainly via Reddit, getting on demo calls, understanding, and also we used to get like a couple of installs here and there every day organically as well in the Shopify App Store. So that became a source of feedback. So that entire process was then like a 2-3 month long process where we collected enough feedback to create a genuinely competitive V1.
Got it. And a little curious, so just on the Reddit strategy, could you talk a little bit more about how you guys went about that? Obviously Reddit is a great platform for e-commerce users, Shopify merchants. How do you know, okay, or did you just sort of find the communities, be like, this is a good place to start and start messaging users? How did you go about that in the beginning?
So back then, which is about a year ago, I wasn't really a Twitter user, not very heavy on LinkedIn either. So there was no avenue that was already available for us to, start understanding how would our software work and how would a certain market segment respond to the software. So scouring around the internet, we found that Reddit had a very clear captive audience of our Shopify, our e-commerce, our dropship. So that niches down it instantly. And then it was just about engaging in the community, talking to different people, not DMing them like absolutely out of the blue, but writing a post that, this is what we're up to and we would love to talk to you. And like a couple of people reached out from there. Then we got one more from their reference. So a lot of was just like guerrilla marketing kind of situation where from one person, you could just figure stuff out. But largely it was down to just engaging in the community, creating content, commenting on posts, and not just like commenting on posts with random platitudes or anything, but actually trying to add value. That this is what I think could be an approach we could take and stuff like that. And a conversation from there could easily lead into your DMs and then on a demo call.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really struck out, generally stuck out to us also has just been how powerful the community has been and how helpful everyone has been with their time. Obviously you are building an app that's adding value to the merchant, so they're happy to chat. But I think, one thing that everyone has sort of said is that everyone is genuinely happy to give feedback, to talk you through things. And that's, I think, especially for people who are getting started in the app ecosystem, that's just really, really valuable, both in terms of validating your idea, but also in terms of feedback as you sort of grow it out. Talking about growth, it's the way I've been looking at it is, yes, you first come up with idea, you build your initial prototype, get some feedback, launch on the App Store, you have your few initial downloads, and it's always exciting. You launch a SaaS product, you see people finding it organically, first few installs. Yeah. And then suddenly you'll hit this point where it begins to plateau a bit, or the growth doesn't become as sort of steep as you'd like. How do you sort of think about scale as a Shopify app? Are you looking more at partnerships? Are you looking at influence marketing? Are you just looking at making sure that customer support is top notch? Is it a mixture of things? What is the strategy that you have sort of been trying out until now?
So the way I look at growth is, how do you stack repeatable, scalable growth engines on top of one another? So you find your first growth engine, which is paramount to the product you build as well, because that's where the first wave of feedback comes from. And once you have a working sense of how that growth engine runs, you start experimenting and hunting out for more growth engines to stack on top of that. So currently for us, our strongest growth engine right now is App Store organic. And that's primarily because we're quite small anyway. So App Store organic is good enough to get to a certain point. I'm pretty sure it will taper off very quickly. Now, apart from that, a couple of growth engines that I'm currently running experiments with, where I have decent early signs and validation, it's just about how do you make it a repeatable process, is organic LinkedIn, organic Twitter, and partnerships, particularly agency partnerships. So for example, right now at my small, almost negligent MRR, 20% of my revenue is being driven from people who are referred to by partners. And the idea is, as the business scales, how can that 20% stick or scale itself as well? So, and the partnerships angle fits very well in my use case, because there are a lot of CRO agencies, there are a lot of marketing agencies that are on the lookout for upsell apps. It's just about finding them and servicing what they're trying to fit for their clients. So partnerships is like one of those next big bets that I have in terms of how do we stack the second growth engine. Organic LinkedIn and organic Twitter is a more long-term play. You stay out there, you stay in the community, you genuinely help people out without any ulterior motives, and the community will pay you back in due course of time. So that's not something like I actively look at as, here's how I drive installs. It's just about staying out there. Apart from partnerships, I think one thing I'm very keen on trying, and that is after we hit a certain MRR and we're able to reinvest it back, is influencers and ads. So ads on Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, taking people to like a demo call or a free trial experience, something of that sort, or doing the same thing through influencers. So these two are the next financial bets that we might take after we set up partnerships.
Nice. Just on the ads point, I noticed you didn't mention Shopify store ads. Is that something you've tried? Is that something you sort of recommend? How do you think through that part?
So we ran a few experiments with the Shopify store ads. We didn't see a lot of success. It's brilliant for keyword discovery, no doubt. So, you keep a broad keyword out and you spend $100 there every week and you forget about it. Come back a month later and you'll actually get these long tail keywords that you could have targeted, but you didn't. So I think the biggest purpose that Shopify store ads has served for us is keyword discovery. Now I do want to go deeper there, but there seems like there has been some regulatory issues with RBI and Shopify, which has created a problem in terms of how an Indian app dev might use Shopify ads. I'm not very clear on them, but it seems like Indian app devs might not be able to use Shopify ads on a very regular basis because the payments keep failing or something of that sort.
Yeah,
Apart from regulatory issues, I'm still not very convinced about Shopify ads in general in terms of scale.
yeah, the regulatory issue is a little unfortunate. Hopefully, that'll
Yeah.
get sorted out soon. But no, it's interesting using Shopify ads as a tool for keyword discovery. Switching gears a bit, obviously, when you started off, you looked at the space as one that isn't necessarily winner takes all, and has a lot of space for folks to grow. Um, I'm sure in the last few months, even like a little more than that, competition has probably really increased
Yeah.
in the space. So how do you think about differentiating from customers? Again, is it features, quality of product, pricing, customer service? What do you think are some of the main sort of ways to differentiate?
I think there are 2, 3 ways that we are trying to differentiate ourselves. One is just on basis of product. When I mean on basis of product, I don't mean like, my feature is better than their feature. It's just about the fact that I have so many features that they might not be able to accommodate. So that could be in terms of building it as a very holistic solution, as opposed to building it as a very customizable solution. That okay, here are certain customizations that I've built out that nobody out there has built. So there's a clear product differentiator there, and that's something that we're currently building, and that seems to be one of our strongest aspects. Customer support is a well-known factor that in the Shopify app space, customer support does prove to become a strong differentiator. Is that it's a very time and resource intensive differentiator that you generate, and the top competitors that you're competing with, or the better apps out there, even they've actually cracked customer support at scale. So when you're small and you're competing with other smaller apps, I think customer support could be a differentiator, but at scale, I think it stops being one. That's where probably product prowess and distribution come into the picture. Now, distribution, one is the channels you use to distribute. The other is the geography you distribute in. So, for example, the upsell space in India is largely empty. And Europe also has a lot of gaps available. I know of a few competitors who've taken one country and completely annihilated it. In terms of organic, word of mouth, agencies, the entire country is on the end. Like if the country has say 10,000 Shopify stores, of which 500,000 need upsell, 3,000 are on this one app. So that's largely playing a very network effect self-referencing game. So I think that's one differentiator that we want to work on very strongly based on geography. So India is one aspect, but Southeast Asia could also be a second one.
Okay, that's very interesting. I haven't thought about the country specific angle too much because usually these apps, obviously companies or developers all around the world, merchants all around the world, and a lot of the problems that are faced are sort of generalizable across geographies. But it's interesting to hear about the role that network effects can play, and makes a lot of sense. Before we wrap up, just a couple of questions on the ecosystem as a whole. It's obviously gone through a lot of changes in the last few years. There's obviously a lot more excitement now than ever has been. A lot more merchants, a lot more apps. What do you think are some of the things that excite you the most about this sort of ecosystem, or the Shopify app ecosystem, for the next 5 years, 10 years and ahead?
I think in terms of the next 5-10 years, I think just D2C as a space will grow at a certain compounded annual growth rate in different geographies. It's growing at a certain rate in India, at a rate in USA, at a rate in Europe, right? Now, that growth will of course pull the entire market with it. So firstly, one thing it's not about being excited, but something that's very reassuring is the fact that you're in a growing market. So opportunities will always be in abundance. You're not in a shrinking market. And that's important in terms of what markets to play in. Because those macro environmental effects will affect your business also in due course of time. So I think the one thing that like really excites or reassures me is that it's a market that's going to grow. It might slow down, but there's no reason why it wouldn't grow in terms of the people starting up and the number of brands coming and stuff like that. Secondly, I think as the market grows, the opportunity to build large businesses become more abundant. The likelihood that you could build $100 million ARR business starting as a Shopify app keeps going up as the market gets bigger. I mean, 7 years ago, you could not have said that. But 7 years from now, you will see several unicorns coming out of India, Brazil, Southeast Asia, which started as Shopify apps. That's down to just how big the market was. Now, not that everybody wants to build a unicorn or everybody should, but it's good to be in a market where if you have big ambitions, you could hit the fences. Let's assume you're a founder who has the ambitions to build a 100 million ARR business, but you're just not in a market that allows you to do that. That's like a bummer. So just the opportunity to build a unicorn, whether you build it or not, is a different ball game. But having that optionality is very exciting.
100% agree. I think that just like you said, right? 7 years ago, no one would have said, oh, you can build like a multi-billion-dollar business as a Shopify app. Today, there's no doubt that you can. Yeah. And that is definitely very exciting. Last question, what advice do you have for someone starting out as a Shopify app developer, as a Shopify app founder right now?
Distribution. I mean, like there is, it's half the game. Treat it like it's half the game. You can't build product 80% of the time and do distribution 20% of the times. Best yet, get a non-technical co-founder on board, or if you are a non-technical, get a technical co-founder on board. The idea is to divide resources equally. If there's one person in terms of the founding team that's consistently looking at distribution, it's only a matter of time before you crack it. It can't be something that you just do on the side. I mean, that might work in some very rare cases, but on the average, it will never work. So give distribution the respect it deserves. That's simple as that, I guess.
Love it. Great advice. Thank you so much, Ravish. This was really, really insightful. I'm sure everyone listening in will appreciate this as much as I've had. Great having you on. Always great speaking with you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye.